Good evening, welcome. Om Parthaya Pradibodhidam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathidam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaidamrudavarshini Bhagavadim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusandadhami Bhagavad Gite Bhavadveshinim Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudramarudastunnanti Divyaistavai Vedai Sangapada Panishade Gayanti Yam Samagah Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pasyandi Yam Yogino Yasyandam Navidusura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha. So we are coming to the end of this chapter, the 8th chapter, and we already discussed in brief the 28th, that is the last verse of the 8th chapter, which essentially is called in the traditional circles the Phalashruti means. What is the ultimate benefit of realizing the highest spiritual truth? Vedeshu yajneshu tapassu chaiva daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtham atyedi tar sarvamidam viditva yogi param sthanam upaidi chatyam. So yam viditva tat sarvam atyedi means knowing this supreme truth. Knowing here that viditva means having known, that is tvanda means it is a kind of it literally means having understood, having known. But the implication is not intellectual understanding or intellectual comprehension, but rather realizing the supreme truth. In fact, we are going to understand the significance of this implication in the coming chapter, 9th chapter. So in Vedanta, whenever we use the word knowing, it really means realizing, because in Vedanta philosophy the ultimate criterion for knowing itself is experiencing. That's one line of demarcation between the empirical philosophical systems and the metaphysical philosophical systems of India. There is always a connection between what we know and our own spiritual evolution. These two processes go together. So what this verse tells us is very simple. When a spiritual seeker realizes the supreme truth, immediately he gets liberated. So obviously that knowledge, not just intellectual comprehension. It is in fact, intellectual comprehension is the beginning of the spiritual journey. One should study the scriptures, then we should meditate on the meaning of the well-known important scriptural statements. And through this contemplation, thinking of the meaning, we internalize these ideas and then bring these ideas into practice. And this verse tells us that it is possible even when we are living in this world. That kind of spiritual liberation is called Jivan Mukti or Sadhya Mukti, which means one can become liberated spiritually, one can become enlightened even while living in this world, even when we are engaged ourselves in different activities, our day-to-day duties and responsibilities, whatever those duties may be, still we can be in a state of spiritual liberation, spiritual enlightenment. Now what does this spiritual liberation really imply in real terms? In real terms, as I mentioned earlier, it acts as some kind of a internal spiritual mechanism. We may call it kind of spiritual common sense. It means even when we are engaged in day-to-day activities, when we face a problem, then we will remember that this problem is part of the phenomenal, the momentary worldly experiences. I mean, everything in this world is relative. It comes and goes, called momentariness in Buddhism. So once we keep this idea in mind all the time, then we'll be always identifying ourselves with this higher spiritual truth, with our own transcendental identity. If you are a devotee of God going to a church or a temple or a Buddhist, any place of worship, praying, practicing weekly Sabbath or any other regular practices, then the same spiritual common sense functions, or it's God's will, I should do my work. So there also it is spiritual common sense that is working. And if you are a Vedantin who has realized transcendental spiritual identity, we are Atman, we are something beyond, going beyond the body-mind complex, then we will remember, well, all these come and go. Changes are inevitable in this impermanent world. So we won't be affected by that. So whatever may be the path we follow, in whatever tradition, we should remember one important sign of a spiritual seeker is that he will be always in a state of contentment. I am using the word contentment in the sense in which it is used in Yoga Sutra, one of the niyamas, tapa, swadhyaya, etc. Shaucha, tapa, swadhyaya, and then it goes santosha. That is one of the niyamas. Santosha means Samyak Tushri, means be a kind of all-round comprehensive joy. That joy is not just absence of misery, as is the case in all empirical experiences. In all worldly experiences, joy is only an absence of misery, because whatever makes us joyful now, it can make us miserable next moment. When we gain something, we become joyful. When we lose the same thing, the same object that we lose becomes the cause of our misery. So that is just two sides of the same coin. But santosha means a kind of, let's say, think of joy or contentment without any possible alternative, without a coin with only one side, if you can imagine. That's why Lord Krishna says we are going to discuss the 12th chapter. Santushta satatam yogi yatatma dridhanishchaya. Lord Krishna is giving a list of the characteristics of an ideal devotee, let us say an ideal spiritual seeker. It's not that he's always clapping his hands or laughing all the time, enjoying, having a good time. Not in that sense. It's not in that sense. Always being established in a state of perfect self-fulfillment. This is possible even for somebody who is sick, who is poor, who is looking for a job, who is facing anxieties and worries. You may not be happy, but you can still be contented. That's why contentment and happiness are two different things from the spiritual perspective. You can be a very unhappy person in the ordinary sense. Suppose a person loses his job and the banks collapse, the stock markets collapse, and you are facing a problem. But that need not necessarily devastate you if you are establishing contentment. So in that sense, Lord Krishna says, Santushtaha sadatam yogi. The long list, yadatma dhrunisseha mayarpidamano buddhi yoma bhakta samay priyaha, like that, I mean, the one who is always contented, He is to be always yogi, he is a practitioner of yoga, and all the time the Dharma, he has a strong will and is fully restrained his senses and mind. Such a person has devoted himself completely to the Lord. But these are the characteristics of a spiritual person. If a devotee, he claims to be a devotee, is always unhappy and miserable, he said, you are insulting the God whose devotee you are claiming to be. That's an important thing to remember. If we are devotees of God, and then if we are not contented, then it shows that we need something more than devotion to be contented. So that is why, now that is that's how we understand in actual practical terms whether a person is a spiritual seeker or not. Remember, he may be facing a problem, he may be facing a challenge, he may solve a problem, he may be trying to remedy a problem, he may be a big man of action, but still he'll be contented. On the other hand, a totally lazy person who does nothing, who has no problem, he may be terribly dissatisfied. The richest man, maybe the most powerful person, who has absolutely no conceivable problem to worry about, he may be terribly unhappy, absolutely no contentment. I don't have to give details, but if you read the lives of any of the great saints and sages of any spiritual tradition, you find that each of them had to pay a price for becoming a saint. They had to walk the hard path. They had to follow the rough road to spiritual enlightenment. So, but then what happens? That person's spiritual merit, attaining, means goes beyond all the benefits that the scriptures proclaim. Somebody who is practicing a lot of vows, fasting, prayers, austerities, pujas, a lot of those things, that person may get some spiritual merits, or you may be practicing a lot of meditation, you may be a big man of philanthropy and charitable, you may be a man of charity. So, daneshu, tapassu, vedeshu, yajneshu. I already discussed in the last session all the sapta havir yajnas, sapta soma yajnas. Already discussed. If those who want to know, you can refer. Again, I won't repeat. 14 Vedic rituals are mentioned in the Kalpas, the Kalpa Granthas, Vedic ritualist works. You practice all of them, you perform all of them. The scriptures say you get a lot of benefit. Now, a man of spiritual enlightenment, he transcends, or the benefit that he gets transcends all the spiritual benefits of practicing vows, practicing charity, and performing Vedic rituals and studying Vedas. Still, the spiritual enlightenment will give you much more spiritual merit. Yogi param sthanam upayiti chatyam. So this is the end of the 8th chapter, the 28th verse. So this is supposed to be a hint at some of the discussions which we are going to find in the 9th chapter, which is a very, very important chapter. Some of the most significant and off-quoted verses in the Gita are from the 9th chapter that we are going to take up right now. So this 28th verse actually hints at the possibility of Jivan mukti or sadhyo mukti. And then we have the conclusion of this 8th chapter. Om Tat Sat Idi Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishatsu. So, Om Tat Sat is a Vedic auspicious statement, and in this Bhagavad Gita, which is equivalent to Upanishad. So, Tadidam Samasta Vedartha Sara Sangraha Bhudam Durvigneyartham. The beginning of Shankaracharya's commentary, Shankaracharya says Gita is a condensation or a summary of all these sublime spiritual teachings found in the Vedas, in the Upanishads. So Gita, though it is part of Mahabharata, which again traditionally one of these Smriti Prasthana, means auxiliary, secondary, compared to Vedas, Mahabharata has only secondary status. But Bhagavad Gita has got the primary status, equal to the status of the Vedas. So it's called Bhagavad Gita, Upanishadsu, Brahmavidyayam. So this particular book deals with Brahmavidya, the science, knowledge, the supreme spiritual knowledge of Brahman, the ultimate spiritual reality, Yoga Shastra. So it discusses the highest spiritual philosophy, but also it describes a path, rather three paths, three ways to attain the spiritual realization, called Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Karma Yoga. Raj Yoga involves restraining the mind and senses, which again are in a way part of the other three yogas. So this is Yoga Shastra. It is a science of the three yogas. It is an Upanishad. It's a great metaphysical work. And it is in the form of a dialogue, a samvada. Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvada is in the form of a dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna. Akshar Brahma Yoga Nama Ashtamodhyaya. This is the 8th chapter, comes to an end. It's called Akshar Brahma Yoga. Means it deals with the Akshar Brahma. So now we are coming to the 9th chapter. And in the 9th chapter, as I mentioned earlier, it is called Rajavidya Rajaguhya. Means, so in a way, Jnana Vijnana it means. It contains both Jnana and Vijnana, the highest spiritual truth, the philosophical exposition, and also a ways to reach that experience, that truth. So in a way it's a continuation of the 8th chapter, so much more significant in many ways than the 8th chapter. Sri Bhagavan Uvaja, that's the first verse, Idam tu te guhyadamam pravakshyami anasuyave jnanam vijnana sagitam yajnatva mokshase ashubhat. Lord Krishna says, now I'm going to explain to you, describe to you, I'm going to teach you this most profound spiritual truth, this most profound, this highest spiritual truth. It's called secret in Rajaguhyam. It's called the royal secret sometimes, the translation. In many ways, it's called the royal secret for 2-3 different reasons. One reason, according to some interpreters, modern interpreters like Swami Vivekananda, Aravinda and others, they said this lineage existed among the enlightened kings of ancient India, so which is referred to in the first verse of the 4th chapter of the Gita. So that is one possible explanation. In the 4th chapter, Lord Krishna explains the lineage. Imam vivasude yogam proktavanaham avayam vivaswam manave praksha manhu iksha kavya pravit evam parambara praptam imam rajasya viduhu sakalena iha mahada yogo nashta parandava. This is the first verse of the 4th chapter. This is sometimes explained or described to be kind of this Rajavidya, the royal spiritual truth, the royal spiritual secret, because it was taught and practiced by the enlightened kings. That's why Lord Krishna decided to teach this to Arjuna. Now, the reason is, it is not just a metaphysical doctrine, but it also includes the art of actual practice of that metaphysical doctrine in the context of everyday duties and responsibilities. And kings in ancient times, the monarchs, so we were Swan, Manu, Ikshwaku, all these are different names, Ikshwaku was the originator of the lineage to which Lord Rama belonged. It's called Soma Vansham, Surya Vamsha. So Lord Krishna says, I taught this Vivaswan to Manu, Manu taught to Ikshwaku, and so on. He said, this lineage is mentioned here, the names of the great ancient sages and teachers. And now I am going to teach you, because these kings and enlightened emperors have, after having learned this from their teachers, from their preceptors, they actually implemented, they made use of this spiritual knowledge even while ruling a country, an empire. We had in our history many such emperors, Janaka and others, and even in the recorded history of India, you have Vikramaditya, Samudragupta, Krishnadevaraya. That's in the 16th century. He was the greatest emperor of the Vijayanagar tradition, and of course then the kings, the emperors of Ujjain, called Samudragupta and Vikramaditya. Samudragupta is called by William J. Some of the modern Western historians of India, he is called the Napoleon of India. Means he was the one who actually, in a very enlightened manner, without actually practicing any massacre, he ran a campaign, military campaign for establishing peace in what is now India's subcontinent, not only today's India, but also which included in those days, which included all the way from extreme south right up to the Central Asia, and from in the east from Burma to today's Afghanistan. So a huge geographical unit. The Samudragupta and his successor Vikramaditya. And again in the 16th century you find great kings like Krishnadevaraya. He was the greatest emperor of the Vijayanagar tradition, who preserved the Vedic tradition in the south. But I'm going to say, so this idea of enlightened kingship, who practiced higher spiritual wisdom, derived from spiritual realization, and employed that wisdom even while performing the duties of an emperor or a king. It is not something purely mythological. You can find many instances in Indian history for that. So that's why he said jnanam vijnana sahitam. So having known which, what do you mean? Knowledge and realization. Vijnanam means realization. Jnana means knowledge. The highest knowledge plus the knowledge, the art of making use of that realization in doing one's duty while living in this world. So this is the great truth which I am going to discuss with you. Of course, Lord Krishna hints why he chose Arjuna as the disciple. You see, so he says, anasuyu. Anasuya ve means the Chaturthi Vibhakti. It means ye dharma arthakamam chalabhade mokshameva channa dushat tam sada prakya saha anasuya smudha buddhaihi. What means he? A person who practices, he get dharma, artha, kama, all this still gets. Still, he considers moksha as the highest goal. In the ordinary means, it says it can mean somebody who is not jealous, who is not petty-minded, who is aspiring for higher values. So, once a person knows this supreme truth, he gets liberated. It is called the Guhyatamam, the Guhyatamam, mean the most profound or most secret. Maybe the reason is this was a spiritual way of life which had two aspects. One, the theoretical intellectual exposition of Vedanta, and then certain teachings directly related to the actual practice of that knowledge. Even when you're sitting on a throne of a huge empire. One grand example was the Chandragupta Maurya, who is actually the founder of the Maurya dynasty. That is about maybe around 200 years after Buddha's time. Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta Maurya's time was perhaps after 220 years after Buddha's time. Supposed to be one of the greatest emperors of Indian history and of those days. It is said that Megasthenes, the great Greek ambassador, who was well known for some of the most well-known works which reveal the close connection between ancient India and ancient Greece. He was Chandragupta Maurya's a member of the Chandragupta Maurya's court, and he was the Greek ambassador in his court. 305, that is the time mentioned of Megasthenes, the great. The time when Megasthenes lived in Pataliputra, which is the capital of Magadha Empire, what is now the Bihar state of India. And his great teacher was Chanakya, who is a well-known author of some of the most wonderful books on stagecraft. How to make use of the knowledge of statesmanship and stagecraft with wisdom. So on the one hand, you should have the mind and intellect of a philosopher, because that gives you an element of restraint when you use the military power, executive power, judicial power. So he was supposed to be the great minister, the spiritual preceptor, the controlling, the restraining aspect of the imperial system. The Chandragupta and Chanakya are considered to be the grand examples of the spiritual restraining power through Chanakya and the executive power through Chandragupta Maurya. Now, so Jnanam Vijnanam means spiritual truth, spiritual realization, and its actual implementation in a most unlikely area of our life. That is, in running a country, using a country. That's why it is said, you should give power to a man who doesn't want power. You should give wealth to a man who doesn't want wealth. Because those power will be safe in the hands of a person who is not running out of power. Wealth will be safe in the hands of a person who is not greedy in that sense. Now, the next verse, Rajavidya Rajaguhyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratikshavagamam Dharmyam Susukham Kartumavayam. So Rajavidya Rajaguhyam. It is called, of all the sciences, of all the branches of learning, it is the highest. Means the kingly science, the highest. And it is also the most profound. It is called secret because it was an art of making use of your knowledge, your spiritual knowledge in real life. And that should be learned only in a very intimate way. You should learn from a teacher and not from a book. From a book, we may be able to learn something, but to be able to practice that in difficult situations, you should learn it from a teacher. So in that sense, it is called Rajaguhyam, Pavitram. It is called a supreme purifier because it does good to everyone. Spiritual knowledge if you have spiritual knowledge, it will be a blessing to the family, to the society, even to the county where you are living. If there is a spiritual man living in the same apartment, the same street, the same society, it's a great blessing to everyone. So, dharmyam is called. Pertaining to dharma can be spiritual awareness. So, it's sometimes a spiritual purifier. And then, pratyakshavagamam. It can be realized, the supreme truth. Like literally means through direct perception. Pratyaksha means direct perception. Aksheshu indriyeshu prati sthitaha idi pratyaksha. Tadhachaya prane tishtan pranandiro yo vaji tishtada. This Brihadaranyupanishad means aksheshu indriyeshu, by our eyes and by our other senses of perception. When we can perceive something, let us say, by seeing, by hearing, music we can hear, sound we can hear, a smell we can understand by using the sense of smell, the perfume, the taste of food, direct perception by eating, the sound of a car, direct perception by hearing, a picture, direct perception by seeing. So, what Lord Krishna says is something very interesting. This supreme spiritual truth. What is the supreme spiritual truth? The supreme spiritual truth is the Atman, the spiritual reality is present in us. It is present everywhere. It is the most transcendental reality. And the whole creation, the whole existence is one spiritual truth. The spiritual oneness and unity of existence. That's the simplest way of explaining what the supreme truth is. We can learn this from books, the logical understanding, not just hearing, because if somebody tells you the whole world is one, people won't understand. How can the whole 8 billion people, so many countries, so many languages, so many food habits, dress codes, so many things, how can the whole humanity be one? So for that you need an explanation. Maybe we can make use of Upanishads, other great spiritual works we can study and logically, intellectually understand. That's okay. But then it can be practiced. So we can literally see the real manifestation of this ideal of spiritual unity and oneness of existence. Pratyakshavagamam dharmyam susukham. And it is very simple, very easy. Spirituality is in reality very simple. Because spirituality simply tells us that spiritually the existence is one. Now, for a person who is ready to accept it, who is spiritually enlightened to understand this, a simple statement is enough. That's what Vedanta says. In Vedantic tradition, there are two schools of teaching and learning. This lineage. And according to one school, those who are ready and fit for hearing and learning the highest spiritual truth, one statement itself is enough, if that person is ready for it. But if that person is not ready for it, then after hearing, after reading so many books, he has to work hard, he has to think, and Vedanta philosophy tells you, you may have to wait for several life cycles to understand it. That is true in empirical world also, in worldly life also. Suppose you want to learn how to operate a machine. If you have a lot of experience in operating similar machines for years and you have learned along, you have memorized the entire that book, manual, so to speak. Then one expert can tell you, explain in 1 minute and you will understand. Because you are already familiar with it. You are ready to understand how to work with the machine. First of all, you have worked with many similar machines, you have read books, you know the manual, so it's easy if a teacher tells you, this is how you should operate this machine. But suppose you have never seen a machine like that and you are temperamentally not inclined to learn anything mechanical, technical, then one explanation won't do. You need several explanations. Maybe it may take a long time for you to learn. Similarly in Vedanta, when we are spiritually ready, one statement, Tattwamasi, you are the spiritual truth, immediately we will realize the meaning as Aham Brahmasmi, I am the Supreme Reality. But if you are not ready for it, it's called Sabda Aparokshavad. You hear the Shabda, immediately Aparoksha Anubhuti will become a fact for our experience, fact of our experience. But if you are not ready for it, then what happens? Then we have to work hard. So in Vedantic tradition, if you have sadhana sadushtaya sampatti, then yama niyama asana pranayama pratyahara etc. And also you have got sravana manana nididhyasana. In other words, if you have a strong sense of renunciation, sense of self-restraint, a strong urge for spiritual liberation, and if you are not interested in anything worldly, and if you read scriptures, you try to understand the meaning of the scriptures by meditating on the meaning of scriptures, and then if you have practiced for a long time, one statement will immediately become a fact of experience. Otherwise, you have to continue for several times. That's why it is called susukham. In fact, if you are a sincere seeker of spiritual truth, reading a spiritual book once or a few lines of a great book will be sufficient. But that may not be enough. If you want to teach, you have to study many, many books. But for your own realization, for your own actual experience, reading once will do. That is susukham kartumavviyam. Pratyakshavagamam dharmyam susukham kartumavviyam. So Lord Krishna makes it very, very simple. Then there is an important verse in the third verse is very, very significant. Asaddhana purusha dharmasya se parantava aprapimam nivartande mrityu samsara vatmani. One important quality, as we already discussed now, is Shraddha. We have to remember, Shraddha is one of those Sanskrit words which cannot really be translated into English or any other language. This is the view of Swami Vivekananda. And he was a master of English language. So it's not that English language is inadequate or anything. The entire English language corpus is so huge. What it means is, Shraddha is a state of spiritual evolution of the mind. So that's why the word in its full implication cannot be translated into a single word into English, the Swamiji says. Well, we can try to understand what Shraddha is by trying to understand what it is not. Suppose a person goes with negativity, a casual approach without any concentration, a dismissive approach about everything, skepticism, hesitation, doubt, restlessness. Suppose these characteristics. which makes it impossible for us to focus on anything seriously. Mind is totally in a very disintegrated state. That is the absence of Shraddha. Now we know what Shraddha is. A person who has got Shraddha, with that mind, you employ that mind in music, you can become a great musician, sublime music. You employ that mind into anything, you can excel in that area. But a spiritual seeker who has this Shraddha, normally he will not care to master things which are purely of utilitarian value. He will understand that our mind is a gift from God. And that will realize only when we have this Shraddha. Very often we get this Shraddha when we get some hard knocks, blows in our life. Sometimes that is necessary. Very frequently, unless we get some hard knocks, unpleasant experiences, we won't be able to turn our mind into something sublime, something that goes beyond these momentary, fleeting experiences of the world. We won't be able to focus on something transcendental unless we get some experience that will teach us this unpleasant lesson. Enough of all these material things. There is something higher that I should seek to achieve. That can give us Shraddha. And then when that happens, our whole mind actually is getting purified. Otherwise, you won't be able to focus on any sublime book or idea. Unless a person has got Shraddha, we won't be able to withstand a serious talk or a discussion on higher philosophy or read a book. Impossible. He can't, because there is nothing that is eye-catching, nothing that will please our emotions and feelings. So in order to be able to take interest in anything higher, especially spiritual subjects, we need this Shraddha. Sometimes, there are certain statements in Sanskrit which emphasizes this aspect. Ahar nidra bhaya maithunam cha samanya medut pasubhir naranam dharmo hi desham adhigo vishesho dharmena hina pasubhis samanaha. Hitopadesha says, what it says is food, sleep, fear, infatuation. All these human beings have got, animals also have plenty of that. They also need food, they also want shelter. So they do everything that human beings do. But there is something unique, something special to human beings. That is dharmohi tesham adhigo vishesha. There is something extra quality, something higher that is found only among human beings. That is dharma, an ideal, a concept of righteousness, higher value. And it is this awareness of the need for a higher value that gives us Shraddha. So Shraddha can be explained as a combination of integrity, sincerity, honesty, a desire for something sublime and transcendental and higher, concentration, focus. All these are different aspects of Shraddha. And Lord Krishna says, Asadadana Purusha Dharmasyasya Parandava Aprapi Mam Nivartande Vritti Samsara Vartmani. Those who do not have this Shraddha, these qualities that we discussed just now, what happens? They won't be able to sit for some time and think, well, what's the meaning of life? I've got a wonderful job, a lot of money, everything going on fine for me. Still, what's the meaning of life? Is there something higher than what I can see and experience with my senses and mind? A Buddha had this problem, and he discovered the truth of sorrow or grief, dukkha. And that made him Buddha actually. He didn't have any problem, really speaking. He saw a sick man, an old man, and then according to one interpretation, he saw a dead body being taken to the cremation ground. So all these darker sides of human existence, human life, death, sickness, old age, pain, sorrow, all these. He never knew such things existed because his father brought him up in such a state of luxury that he was not allowed to see anything of the dark side of human life. So when he saw this, what happened? He got this Shraddha. Shraddha is actually what takes us to aspire for something higher, sublime, transcendental and spiritual. And that is the unique quality of human beings. Lord Krishna says, those who do not have this Shraddha, what happens? They continue going around this cycle of life, birth, life, death and rebirth, and this continuing wheel of existence. Now, those who have this spiritual wisdom to look for something higher and transcendental, they will look for higher value, and then they will direct their efforts in the spiritual direction, and they will come out of this cycle, this wheel of samsara as they call. It's a common word used in Jaina religion, Buddhism especially, and of course in Hinduism. This continuing cycle. So, of course, it's not easy for us to get dissatisfied with worldly life. It's not easy. That's why, it's not possible for everyone. But Lord Krishna doesn't disappoint everyone. He says, at one stage or other, in one of our life cycles, we will come to sit for some time and think, well, what's the meaning of life? Well, that's the moment when we board this bus to higher spiritual destination. Sometimes it can come in the form of losing the job. You will continue searching for a job, but you realize that losing the job is part of the game of life. Some death of a near and dear one, that could happen. That could be the beginning. It happened to Ravana Maharshi, he said. So, it need not necessarily happen to us that we should go to a cave and meditate, not necessarily. But you can sit back and think, well, there is something higher than the money that I have deposited in the bank, the car that I have got, or the higher things that I am looking for. They are necessary, they are needed, but then something higher can be added to that, so that life will become more livable, more meaningful, more relevant. That's why Shankaracharya says in his commentary on the third verse, Shankaracharya says, Parameshwaram matprapto na eva ashank iti matprapti marga sadhana bheda bhakti matram api aprapya ityartha nivartande nischayena avartande. What Shankaracharya says is, those who have no devotion to God, to higher idea, they again after death they will come back and be born again, and they continue this rotation in this wheel of samsara, this wheel of birth, life and rebirth. Kva murti samsaravat mani murti yukta samsaro murti samsara tasya varma naraga tirigadi prapti marga tasmin eva vartande ityartha. The Vedanta gives you something not very easy to understand in modern times. It says, when we do not look for some higher value in life, what happens? After death, we go to a place, and then we are not sure we'll be born as human beings. We may be born as different animals. We may be born in the kingdom of animals. That's what Shankaracharya says. This is a traditional view. What it means is, we may take a descent in our evolution. That's the idea behind it. On the other hand, when we take an interest in these spiritual values, even if we do not succeed in reaching our destination in this life, still we won't lose anything. According to Vedantic tradition, every good actions we do will produce its result. The good action may be that we have meditated a little once a while, or we may have helped somebody, or we may have read a number of good books, so we have accumulated some great ideas in our mental system. That will be a spiritual bank balance. And we may not have reached this highest enlightenment like Buddha. We may die, we will be born again in a set of circumstances where we will be able to continue our spiritual journey. Maybe in a family where your parents will train you in higher values even from your younger days. So that our spiritual journey will continue in the coming life cycles. So we won't lose anything. That is explained, we already discussed this, the 6th chapter of the Gita. You can refer to the previous verses. Now, we will have interaction maybe for 10-15 minutes. You are most welcome. It's a new chapter. You are most welcome to ask questions. Okay. Thanks.
Maharaj,
Yeah.
I have a question about the use of the word anasuya in the first verse of this chapter.
Yeah.
It seems an unusual locution. First of all, it's in that negative form.
Yeah.
But it does suggest that Arjuna has already, by chapter 9, reached the level of non-negativity.
Yeah.
That he's already sort of being encouraged, I think. Not to be chipping away at what he's learning.
Yeah.
So it just seems like a very unusual word. Does that appear anywhere else in the text?
Okay. Now here, anasuyu is an adjective used. So in Sanskrit conversation, in Sanskrit books, you find a person can be addressed with an adjective. That adjective will explain his special characteristics. You can parantapa. Parantapa actually means those who are torturer of enemies. So you find Bharadashapha. The higher, the supreme person born into Bharata dynasty. So Rishabha actually means the big bull. So you find in Sanskrit, especially in poetical Sanskrit, this is a common practice. Adjectives can substitute for nouns. Lord Krishna, Pandava, his father's name was Pandu. So Pandavas, 5 Pandavas. So you find Kaunteya, the son of Kunti, mother's name. So in Sanskrit poetical works, even in the ancient dramas, there was this one drama called Kudiyatam. It is supposed to be the oldest existing dramatic form, which is traced to be existing without a break from 8th century BC. So it is one of the UNESCO's part of human heritage event. So it used to be practiced in places where there was no mic or anything. So every sentence is very long because you have to shout. So many adjectives are used one after another. So without a noun. In English, you don't call you brave, you don't call you brave man, you may say. So an adjective will be qualifying a noun. But in Sanskrit, on the other hand, an adjective can be used as a substitute for proper noun. The adjective will in some ways explain, reveal one important characteristic of the person who is addressed. Pandava. Arjuna is addresses, hey Pandava. Pandava means, O son of Pandu. Kaunteya. His mother's name was Kunti, a son of Kunti. Bharadashaba. He was one of the prominent person belonging to Bharata group, Bharata lineage. So this is a common practice. Vasudeva, Lord Krishna. Vasudeva means Vasudeva's son. Lord Krishna's father's name was Vasudeva. So Lord Krishna is called Vasudeva. Actually it's an adjective. His real name was Krishna. But all the adjectives actually are used with the same implication, with the same effect as the proper noun. This is a common practice. Yeah. So every proper name, I've got so many adjectival names because in Sanskrit prefixes, suffixes system will help you to form any number of adjectives. Because the Sanskrit grammatical system can be used to form any number of adjectival nouns. Sometimes, the same Pandava can be an adjective. Pandava Arjuna means and Arjuna who is the son of Pandava. But she can be used just Pandava. That's also. So an adjective can be used as a substitute for noun, proper noun. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting question. I want such questions. So it's an occasion for us to discuss some of the unique features of Sanskrit language.
Ram Swamiji, I'll ask a question on behalf of a YouTube listener.
Yeah.
So he first says that until I was in my early 20s, I was in the control of my lower mind. And then I read Swamiji's lectures and read books and attended lectures, and then the reality hit me.
Yeah.
And so then his questions are twofold. He says, now that the reality has hit me, I have set a goal for myself to crack the civils exam. How do I know that I have set the right goal for myself?
Yeah.
And then his second question is, how do I impart Shraddha in my lifestyle?
Yeah. But, if you have chosen this goal to appear for the civil examinations, civil service examinations, then with full focus, with concentration, you should work hard to achieve that goal. So, as you are a student, you should put up your best effort. That is Shraddha actually. Shraddha is not necessarily a focus or attention, concentration that we show in meditation and spiritual practices alone. Shraddha is also a quality that is needed for one to do one's duty, perform one's responsibility with efficiency, with sincerity and honesty and effectiveness. So, Shraddha is not just a spiritual quality. For certain people, Shraddha comes in the form of awareness of something higher and supreme. For certain people, Shraddha can come in the form of a sense of duty, responsibility, efficiency, looking upon whatever we do and do it efficiently, and looking upon everything as a sacred duty. Writing an examination, doing work in an office can also be done with Shraddha. Shraddha is something that we can practice in every sphere of our life. It is not something that we practice only when we meditate or pray. It is something we can practice in our office work, place of work, in everyday duties and responsibilities also. The point is, when you do that, whatever work you do, irrespective of whatever work you're doing, you can enjoy this inner feeling of contentment. I'm doing the right thing. And it fills the heart. And you have no problem, you have no anxiety, no worry. So that is the greatness of Shraddha. In fact, Lord Krishna chose Arjuna because he had this Shraddha. Arjuna was a very sincere, honest person. He was confused, no doubt, but he has Shraddha in the sense he wanted to do the right thing. When a desire to do the right thing and a desire to approach somebody with a question, how I should do the right thing, that is also an expression of Shraddha, integrity, honesty, and so on. So one should work hard to achieve one's chosen goal. That is wonderful. Please see if there is any question in the YouTube or elsewhere, you can see and you can let me. Because some devotees wanted me to answer questions that they are typing on the YouTube, which frequently I am not able to do. If there is any question, you can please let me know every time.
Yes, Swamiji, right now there are no further questions.
Thank you. So thank you. Yeah, okay.
I have a question on contentment.
Yeah.
I think you already touched on that question.
Yeah.
So, we being a subject matter expert, like in few areas, how much time or how do you think we should spend time? Because the more time we spend on, like, let's say, examination or some subject we are focused on, it will take our more time from spirituality. So, is there like contentment in not just terms of finance or money, or also in terms of like this subject or exams?
Well, contentment is something different from the joy or happiness or satisfaction that we normally experience when we get something, a job or money or a promotion or something. Contentment is something deeper. And contentment, it becomes a protective armor in our mind. It will protect us from trustlessness, anxiety, nervousness, doubt, skepticism, because all these problems will drain our energy, mental and physical energy. If you are restless, your energy will be drained out. So also all these problems. So contentment, a person who has contentment within, he may not have reason to be happy all the time. But, see, for example, suppose a person loses his job. It's not an occasion for celebration. It's not an occasion for happiness. But if you have a sense of contentment in your life, without being shattered by that unpleasant experience, you will continue looking for a job. If you don't have contentment, then you're happy when you get a job, you'll be terribly unhappy when you lose that job. So contentment actually takes us beyond happiness and unhappiness. So it helps our mind from becoming too much affected by any unpleasant or negative experiences. A study or whatever it is, that is irrespective of whatever it is. I'm not sure if you have got the right answer. If not, you can continue. You can continue asking questions.
Yeah, my question was like how. So I'm trying to understand, like since I do some work where like expertise is needed, I spend more time on it.
Can you excuse me? Can you speak a little slowly, less rapidly? That would be helpful, please. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Is it okay now?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the more time I spend on like subject what I'm into, the more time it's taken away from spirituality. So I'm just trying to understand, like, where should my contentment be, or where should my boundary? Yeah. That I should not. I should spend this much time on this, but now I should follow my spiritual practice. Yeah.
Then no, you should not see a line of demarcation between your spiritual practice and your work, study or office work, whatever it is. Even study becomes part of your duty because you're a student. Doing work in the office becomes part of your duty because you're an employee or you're working. That's your duty and responsibility. So spirituality actually It's not something that we practice for a few hours in the morning and evening or maybe once a week, not at all. Spirituality can be brought in to the classroom where you are studying or teaching, to the office place, to the work area where you are doing your duties and responsibilities. When you do sincerely, honestly, doing your best to get the best result in the examination, you are practicing spirituality. That's what Gita teaches. That is one unique contribution of Gita. So that's why Gita brings in this yoga aspect. But that is one of the revolutionary contributions of Gita among the scriptures of Hinduism. In the Upanishads and Vedas, they give these great philosophical ideas, but they do not directly tell us what we should do when we are working in the office, teaching in the university, or if you are a social worker, whatever, or you are a banker or a businessman, what you should do. The Upanishads don't tell you, but Gita tells you. Gita tells you how you can practice the teachings of Gita even when you are a student, you are doing your work, when you are studying your textbooks for the examinations. You do that to the best of your ability, efficiency, and then in the morning once or the evening once, you can practice spirituality. We are planning to reopen this temple on 19th September. That's the plan. So, if you are in the Bay Area, you are most welcome to visit this ashrama, 2323 Valley Street, San Francisco. Or you can send an email to me. You can send the email address on the website, svedanta.org. And if you can directly come here, I can explain things more directly, more than what I can do in the Zoom class. Okay? Okay.
Thank you, Ashwin.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Swamiji, for your
Yeah.
Just a minute.
Please continue.
Thank you, Swamiji, for your lecture this evening.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, please continue. Yeah, please continue.
Can you hear me, Swamiji?
Yeah, I can hear. Please continue. I can hear. Yeah. Please continue.
Mark, we can hear you, Mark. Can you hear us? Looks like Mark is not able to hear us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Swamiji, it looks like Mark is not able to hear us.
He may have, by mistake, muted it at this end. Can you hear me? Yeah. Can you hear?
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, please, continue.
I can't hear my own. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about all that. I don't know if you heard me say, but I want to thank you for your lecture this evening.
I can hear you.
Okay. My question is, very succinctly, is suffering necessary for spiritual growth?
Yeah, okay. No, not at all. It's not at all necessary, not at all. What I said was, sometimes for some people, the Shraddha, this turn for a higher value can come in the form of an unpleasant experience. Not necessarily. Never. Is that clear to you? Answer?
Yes,
Yeah.
but I've been reading a chapter from Swami Tattwamananda's book, Seeing God Everywhere. And one of the chapters is called Blessed Suffering.
Yeah.
And he talks about how suffering, he says when we come to spiritual life, suffering has not merely to be endured, but often loved. For many saints and seers, great agony became the door to illumination.
Yeah. Okay. Not necessarily. Sometimes you find sufferings can be an indirect inspiration for people to reach higher levels. See, Sri Ramakrishna had no problem. His only problem was he was not able, he wanted to realize God. He wanted to see God. That was the only thing. Shankaracharya had no problem. He left his home when he was 6-year-old. Absolutely no problem. So remember, suffering, our scriptures do not teach that suffering is an indispensable qualification for spiritual growth. No. But for many people, frequently, sufferings can be an opening, but not necessarily. Actually, the teaching is meant to teach our spiritual seekers that they should not be deterred, they should not be disturbed, they should not allow themselves to be disturbed or prevented from continuing their spiritual pursuit. They should not feel discouraged if there is a problem. So they should be able to look upon all problems as part of this journey. So these teachings are meant to encourage people, and it is a fact. It's a fact. For a spiritual seeker will not look upon sufferings as sufferings. That's all. But that is a natural quality that comes to a spiritual seeker. A spiritual seeker is not necessarily a spiritual seeker because he has sufferings. What we normally call sufferings will not be suffering for him. But one should not seek suffering. Suffering is not at all indispensable for spiritual life. No. I don't know if it's clear or not, sound system.
No, it is.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, because the sound problem, we can perhaps, this sound problem, I don't know, there's an echo somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.